Today, I want to have more of a discussion video. I want to talk about franchises, getting more books several years later after a series is already complete. I want to talk about franchise fatigue, whether we're excited for more books or we're also apprehensive, all of that. And is franchise fatigue happening with books as much as it's happening with movies and TV series? So this is what I want to discuss, and all of this discussion is brought on by, we have the announcement that we are getting a 5th book in the Hunger Games universe, or in Pan Am. And honestly, I have a lot of mixed feelings about it. And my mixed feelings are basically about all of this stuff. So let's dive in. Honestly, my first reaction anymore to getting another installment in a series that is supposed to be complete is just why? Why are we doing this? We don't need this. But I don't think new installments in series that are already complete are always a bad thing. But I'm just tired of, I guess, revisiting the same stories over and over, and I do look for new things. And I think this is much more of a problem with TV shows and movies, how we get so many installments in the most popular franchises and not as much branching out into new things. Now, I think it's a lot easier with books to branch out into new things because there are lots of books being published all the time, and there's a lot of books that are flying under the radar that are amazing, that you can find new things in books much faster than in movies and TV, although maybe that's because I'm not looking. I feel like the same is probably true of movies and TV, that there are indie films and indie shows, there's under the radar things being made all the time. We just don't hear about them as much, but it's kind of the same with books. Like, you just don't hear about the underrated stuff as much, and you just hear about the big names. And I think the biggest problem, obviously, is if the follow-up feels like a cash grab or feels not as well written, or just a letdown, a disappointment for fans of the original content. I don't even know if that needs to be said at this point, because I feel like that's so obvious, because I feel like things can be followed up and be followed up well. We can have really good future installments in a series, and fans generally like those things because we like good stories. And I think some of the fatigue also just comes from rehashing the same stories rather than actually finding something new to talk about within these series. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't know if it happens quite as much with books, that we keep getting the same story over and over and over again, but it definitely feels like that with movies and TV shows, that sometimes it's the exact same plot over and over and over again. And the thing that's annoying the most about that is some of these stories do have interesting elements to be explored. And instead of exploring those, like, there could be interesting stories to be told in this universe, but instead of exploring those, we're just going to retell the same story beats in a slightly different fashion instead of exploring those other really interesting stories. So I just want to interject here and say that I'm definitely being a hypocrite about this, because I enjoy the Murderbot series, and the Murderbot literally has the same plot over and over again, but I enjoy the character of Murderbot and I enjoy the humor in the series. So I basically just kind of excuse the fact that it's episodic and just retreading the same thing over and over. I do think we're making small steps forward whenever I'm reading the Murderbot books. I've only read 4 of them, but Murderbot is changing his outlook a little bit. So I do think that there are steps forward, but like, maybe treading new ground isn't necessarily the answer. Maybe I don't know what the answer is. That's kind of why I'm having this discussion, because I have a lot of thoughts, but I don't have answers to any of this. And I have mixed feelings and I have conflicting thoughts on all of this. But if we're going to talk about some positives of new things in the same world, I mean, a lot of people are probably going to pick up the new Hunger Games book that maybe wouldn't have if it just had Suzanne Collins as the author. Although I'd be really interested, because I feel like a lot of people would try a new Suzanne Collins book, even if it was not in the Hunger Games world. I really like the quotes that I read from Suzanne Collins about her inspiration for this new Hunger Games book. And anytime she talks about her world that she's created or her inspirations for it, I'm always really interested in what she says. I feel like she has a lot of very interesting ideas. Now, personally, I could be like, I would be more interested if she would explore these ideas in a new world rather than continuing to explore them in the Hunger Games world. But she's the creator of the Hunger Games world, and if she feels like she wants to continue exploring things in the Hunger Games world, like the world's already set up for her, she just can explore other ideas now in this setting, like that sounds like a great thing to do. And I can totally see, as a creator, wanting to tweak and perfect things, or maybe explore things in a different part of the world, or just continue to operate within this structure that you already have set up for yourself. So I think there can be a lot of positives, because I also think there are, in pretty much every world that's created, there are other interesting stories that can be explored within that world, as long as we are exploring new ground instead of just retreading the same ground. And as long as the stories are actually interesting and I guess worth exploring, I guess for the author, they always are. Like, if you are a creator, you always want to like tinker, and I guess for you, it's always worth exploring, but I guess maybe it's not always worth publishing, because as a consumer, I might be more picky about what I want from it than someone who's actively creating in that world. And I think this is part of it too, just like what I want as someone who's reading books, stories from these worlds, versus someone who's actively creating in them. Another example of this, which is somewhat related, is I put out a recent review of The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo, and in that review I said it was basically an alternate universe of her debut story, Shadow and Bone. And I hold to that. I honestly think we followed a lot of the same plot beats. But again, that's what I just said, like, Shadow and Bone was her debut novel, and she has said, there might be something she would tweak if she was writing it now. I can't fault her for that. And it is kind of an interesting dilemma, because whenever you write a book, you are tweaking it and editing it and changing things until it is published. And then, I, as someone who reads these books, could be like, okay, now you should walk away and leave that story alone. But the creator might have a hard time just like walking away from this thing that she spent so much time on and so much time developing and changing and tweaking. Does the desire to do that go away simply because it's now published? So Leigh Bardugo writing an alternate universe of her previous work makes a lot of sense, because she might have other ideas, or she's exploring those ideas in a different form now, in a different story with different characters, but it's the same ideas, and she wants to continue exploring those things in her writing. And I honestly, whenever I think of it like that, I'm like, yeah, absolutely, like, people should be able to continue to explore things like that. But at the same time, I was disappointed by The Familiar, because I just wasn't as interested in the story, particularly whenever I was seeing how much similarities it had to Shadow and Bone. And in the same vein, this is a really interesting thing that happened, and I've not read the Bone season by Samantha Shannon, but she rewrote the Bone season and is publishing a rewritten version of the Bone season. I don't know how much was edited in these rewritten versions, but I'm very curious, and it is really interesting to see an author republish an edited version of their work after the initial publication. Now, again, this was her debut story, so I can totally see, as you progress as a writer, that you would have things that you'd be like, oh yeah, I would change that. And just thinking about my time on YouTube, if I go back and watch my older videos, there are things that I would change about how I said something, or I'm gonna look back at this video and be like, I totally disagree with myself, because that you grow as a person and you continue to change. And it makes sense that some people might just close the door on a chapter. They're like, yeah, I created this story and I tinkered with it and I'm closing the door on that and I'm moving on. But it also makes sense that people would want to revisit that and explore other ideas within those stories, or, you know, want to rewrite or tinker more with those stories. And it kind of gives me a different perspective on this whole endlessly seeing stories in the same franchise. Now, I am mostly focusing on books here, and I do think there is a difference between writers wanting to continue their book series and all the movies and TV series that are coming out constantly. And I'm the first to admit, I don't know the full workings behind what goes into movies and TV series and scripts and writing and all of that. And I know there's a lot more people working on it. And I also know that sometimes people who are continuing the stories are not the original creators. And particularly if we're talking about something like Star Wars, there are so many people creating in Star Wars universe right now. And a lot of it does have to do with like the projects that the studios approve to continue, you know, working on these projects, which you could say with books, like the publisher is going, yeah, I'll take another work of yours from this universe. I'll go ahead and publish that for you. So like, yeah, you could say the publishers are standing in as the studios, and I think there are some comparisons there, but at the same time, like, I don't know how much freedom an author has to, like, an author could write a new work in their world and not publish it or self-publish it, or, you know, I feel like there are other options for authors, and I'm not sure what that looks like in like the movie and TV industry. And that does kind of make me wonder if this is more of a movie and TV problem, that, you know, the franchise fatigue, us getting tired of the same stories over and over. Maybe this is more of a movie and TV thing, and this is not so much a book thing. But whenever I think about some of the book series that I've enjoyed that got books much later, I'm not always satisfied with them, and maybe I need to read more, because I know there are people who have read series and then those series several years later a new book came out in that series and people have really enjoyed it and really liked it. So maybe there is room for that. And I think that's true of everything. Like, some people are going to love certain stories and other people aren't, and, you know, fans are going to disagree on things. But I'm just thinking personally, you know, some of the series that have later books I've not always enjoyed. And then the Hunger Games one is a prequel, which I also think there's a problem with prequels, and the fact that you already know how the story ends up, and you might not know how this particular story ends up, but it really depends what characters are involved and how much this influences our later story, because we already know what happens with some of the stakes in this story, and that does create a very different dynamic for prequels than it does for writing sequels or continuing the story down the line. One example of this, and I feel like people are pretty split on their opinion of this, but we had Legends and Lattes, and I read Legends and Lattes and really enjoyed it, and I was actually kind of looking forward to the prequel for Legends and Lattes, and the prequel came out, Bookshops and Bonedust, and I did not like it as much. And I know people are fairly split. Some people still loved Bookshops and Bonedust, and some people really felt like the tension wasn't there. Like, this wasn't the story that they were looking for. This wasn't what they were looking for in a Legends and Lattes prequel. I think that's the most recent one that comes to mind. But as far as other book series, of course, there is the Cursed Book or the Cursed Child. And there are the Fantastic Beasts scripts that are just published in book form, and the Fantastic Beasts franchise kind of crashed and burned. And then the other series I'm thinking of is the Giver series, which I also feel like people are fairly divided on the fourth book in the Giver series. But I read the series back when it was only 3 books, and I thought it was a complete story as is. And then we got a 4th book much later, and I didn't really enjoy the 4th book. Although I maybe should go back and revisit that series, because it's been a very long time since I read it. And the other one I'm thinking of is the Ranger's Apprentice. So we have gotten so many books in this universe, And I've definitely stopped reading all of the new installments, although there are still people who read them and enjoy them. So maybe these books aren't being written for people like me. They're being written for the fans that are excited about these series and going to enjoy reading them. So I don't know. I just have like conflicting thoughts on all of this. I also think it's not a bad idea not to get super hyped, because I feel like the more hyped you get, the more disappointed you can be. So I don't know how to feel about the new Hunger Games book. I probably am going to read it. So let me know what your thoughts are on all of this below, and I hope to see you in another video. Happy reading!